McCarthy. He's a senior writer, contributing editor at National Review. You need to follow him at Andrew C. McCarthy on Twitter. Andrew, thanks for coming.
Kurt, my man, it's great to be with you, and the feeling is mutual.
Well, you might not believe it, but as a Los Angeles trial lawyer, I have quite an ego. So tell
me that's not true.
I know, right? Who would have thought? Well, thank you for that powerful and completely justified testimonial. Eddie, we've got a lot to talk about today, so I want to jump right into it. You're a former United States federal prosecutor. Working for the Department of Justice. You've been outside for a while, but I think you're the foremost and you're the essential analyst for what's been going on, and a lot of stuff's going on. Can you explain to us a little about what's currently happening in the General Mike Flynn case? There was a development yesterday, a filing by the Department of Justice opposing en banc review.
Well, here's what's happening. The panel decided 2-1. It's a 3-judge panel. Decided 2-1, granting the mandamus petition, which means effectively ordering Judge Sullivan to dismiss the case, which is basically how it should come out. And I was kind of surprised that they did the right thing, mainly because I listened to the oral argument, which is 2 hours of my life I could never get back.
You and me both, brother.
But they seemed in the oral argument to be leaning in the direction of kind of like nudging Judge Sullivan that, you really ought to dismiss the case, but not wanting to pull the trigger and tell him that he's acting lawlessly. But then, they turned around and did it on a 2-1 vote. So he had 10 days at that point because he's kind of the defendant in this case. So he's got standing to ask for what's known as en banc review.
Does he have standing? Is that established? Because he's not what we call a real party in interest.
Well, yeah, except the order is directed at him. And I think that because the order is directed at him, and it is directed to correct his lawlessness, he's got a right to at least ask them to take another look at it. He was represented by counsel as if he were the defendant in the proceeding.
Didn't the DOJ challenge his standing in its filing yesterday?
They may have. Yeah,
Okay.
I haven't looked at the filing yet. I know that they did. I've read a report that they filed for it, but I haven't studied what they put in yet.
Yeah, and I just love having the Hugh Hewitt radio audience that understands terms like real party and interest and understands that mandamus is not one of the lesser Roman emperors. So it's always delightful. But in any case, how do you get en banc review?
So there's 11 active judges, and they make a distinction between active judges and senior judges. At a certain point, I think when they're over 75, the judges can ask to go senior. It's up to them to decide to do it, I think, in the D.C. Circuit. But anyway, there are 11 active judges on the circuit. And the way en banc review works, at least in the D.C. Circuit, I think this is pretty common arrangement across the country. You need to get a majority of the judges, that is 6 of the 11, to vote to take the case. It doesn't mean that they're going to vote to change what the panel did, but 6 of them have to agree to review it by the full court, which means all 11. And if they decide to take it, then it would be reviewed by all 11 judges. I don't think they're going to take it, but, I've been wrong on any number of things with this.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to something that's very troubling to me. Yeah. Oh, but before we do, why don't you think they're going to take it?
Well, the court skews 7-4 to Democrats, so you would think that if they're going to vote just according to party lines, then that should be the end of it. They'll take it. But I think it's a messy case for them. For example, the chief judge there is a guy by the name of Sri Srinivasan, who is often touted as somebody who's like Supreme Court material if the Democrats ever get back in. And the problem for him in this case is he wrote the main case that decides the case against Judge Sullivan.
Fokker?
So he would, So he'd be in the bad position for him of either having to walk away from his own precedent, which makes him look terrible, or vote in favor of Flynn, which probably disqualifies him among progressives if he ever wants to get on the Supreme Court. So I would think that, and he's the chief judge.
Wait a minute, Andrew McCarthy, are you telling me that sometimes outside considerations affect pure questions of law?
Yeah,
What?
I know that no one who reads Justice Gorsuch's stuff could ever believe that was true, and certainly Chief Justice Roberts' stuff. But believe it or not, I think that they occasionally take political circumstances into account.
I'm stunned, Andrew McCarthy. Well, let's move on to something I find very troubling, which is the phenomenon of left-wing prosecutors in Democrat-run big cities providing top cover for rioters. They, the police arrest these guys. These DAs dismiss the charges and basically let them go and refuse to prosecute. And when a citizen resists, as we saw in Missouri with the McCloskey family, they charge the regular citizen who's simply defending his or her home. I find that extremely, extremely troubling.
Yeah, Kurt, the problem with this is it's of a piece with everything else they're doing. These are like the occasional things that rise to the surface, which we get to see and we say, man, that's not the way things are supposed to work. But this kind of stuff goes on all the time with these progressive prosecutors who are, their defining characteristic is that they're politicizing the system for their agenda. And, a lot of them are radical leftist lawyers. Some of them were former defense lawyers, like, for example, the guy in San Francisco, Chisa Boudin, who was the son and I guess foster son of Weather Underground terrorists, now the district attorney of San Francisco. He basically came in on a platform of let's not enforce the law except against the police. And they voted him in. So, what are you going to do about the people who put people like this in prosecutors' offices? But it's the problem that you have is that this is a very thought-through plan by the left, particularly their money-raising network. And a lot of these DA races, because most DAs in the country are elected, they were typically like five-figure races, so that if you raise like 50, 60, 70,000 bucks, that was a lot of money. So now these Soros network and the other lefty fundraising networks, they come in and they're plunking down, hundreds of thousands, if not in some jurisdictions, millions of dollars into these races, and they're overwhelming the candidates they run against, and then they get these guys in and they implement their agenda, which is, the entire menu of lefty pieties, and obviously cutting back on firearms freedom is part of it.
One of the things that we've seen, Andrew McCarthy, is these prosecutors, blatantly and unfairly allowing their allies to go free, but selectively prosecuting people who are acting, clearly in self-defense. And Missouri has a very clear self-defense laws. And as we know, I don't think they're ever going to go to jail. However, in many ways, the process is the punishment. Now, Josh Hawley has asked the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, I believe, to go in and investigate this. Does the federal government have grounds to take action against what appears to be politically motivated, unfair, and unequal application of the law by state officials?
Yes, they do. Yeah, they do under the civil rights laws. Now, to be clear, these cases are really hard cases because you have to show that the official who, by the color of law, deprived the person of his or her federal rights, you have to show that they, knew and intended to do exactly that. So it's a lot harder to make these cases if you can't establish a pattern. So you need to go through. Typically, you would need to go through a number of cases and show that they're doing the same thing again and again, but it can absolutely be done. And the other thing they can do, Kurt, is, and the Obama administration famously did this to the country's police departments in various states around the country. So this would be a kind of a turning of the tables. But they can also file a what's known as a pattern or practice civil rights suit, like a civil action, and rather than just a criminal action.
And get a consent decree or an order. Andrew
Right.
McCarthy, now you've been a great critic of some of the practices in the Department of Justice bureaucracy. There are people in the Department of Justice who probably sympathize with these DAs. Now, even if William Barr doesn't.
Right.
We have about 5 seconds. Do you think, as a practical matter, Barr could push through an investigation like this, or would it be stymied?
He could do it, but he's got to ride herd on the Civil Rights Division.
Andrew McCarthy, thank you. This is Kurt Schlichter, sitting in for the great Hugh Hewitt. We're going to be right back with David Drucker. Stick around.